Sometimes we want to know our future, but today we're going to learn why it's probably a good thing that God doesn't reveal our future. Join us today. All right, good morning. Welcome to our Encouraging Truth. Glad you're joining us today. Today we're going to talk about King David again. And quite a few lessons ago, we talked about David killing the giant Goliath. And we saw in that lesson how David has this big monster victory in his life. And this time David becomes a household name. And you would think that once that would happen, then he would just ascend to the throne, and then life would be really, really great from him after that. But that's actually not what happened. Like, once he killed Goliath, and once he became a household name, his life kind of crashed and burned after that. So, Encouraging Truth 87 is this: it's a good thing God doesn't show us our future, which I'm beginning to think that. Because if God had shown David ahead of time, I don't even think he would have attempted to kill Goliath. If he would have known ahead of time what was coming down the road, I think David would have been like, nope, that's okay, someone else can kill him. Because if God had shown David his future, which included a lot of hurt, a lot of betrayal, people out trying to kill him, David would be running for his life. And I don't think he would have killed Goliath if he knew all of those things were going to happen. What we learned from David is that after David kills Goliath, God needs to grow little David up. He needed to grow David up to be a man who would trust God no matter what. A man who would never walk away from his faith. A man that would be devoted to his God until the day he died. But what we learn about David and what we learn about life is that we grow up most in the darkest times of our life. Like, if you look at this picture of this big, beautiful flower bed, but you realize that in order to get those big, beautiful flowers, here you go, seeds had to be planted in the dark. Seeds grow in the dark underground. Negatives, we used to have to take our negatives in to be, make prints, pictures from them. Now, with cameras the way they are, but it used to be that a negative would have to be turned into a beautiful picture, but it would have to go into a dark room for that to happen. What we're going to see is that life was good for David until everything pretty much went dark. And the problem is that when you and I go through dark times in our life, we get confused and frustrated and anxious, and we just can't figure out what God is doing. So I want to talk to you today, those of you who feel like life isn't really getting better. It actually seems to be getting worse. And it dawned on me that just watching the life of David, that so much of our life is spent just waiting for things to get better. I get messages from people all the time saying, when are things going to go back to the way it used to be? And I want to just say, well, I don't know. Maybe when God is done teaching you what you need to learn. Okay, that's what happened with David. When Michelangelo was asked to create the statue of David, many people asked him, how in the world can you take this big chunk of metal or marble and make David out of it? And what was said was, that big chunk of marble is David. I'm just chipping away at what ought not to be there. And that's what God does with us. Through all the difficult times and the troubles in our life, God is chipping away what ought not to be there. But unfortunately for us, that takes time and heartache and patience, which is what we're going to see and learn from David. Many times we have to wait in the dark until things start to change. But it's in the dark that we have to learn to refocus. We can't be focused on the darkness. We have to turn and try to find the light. So after David kills Goliath, he's about ready to embark on the most difficult days of his life. All because he did something good, something that God wanted him to do. Some of you are right there. God asks you to marry that person. God asks you to adopt that child. God asks you to take that job. And just like killing the giant with David, it's like, yes, this is perfect. It's everything I thought it would be. But then life gets real. And that person you got married to, well, you're realizing that's a little bit more difficult than you thought it would be. You're trying to blend two people with different personalities and different hopes and dreams and ideologies, and you're putting them together. That's a lot of work. The cute little baby that you were super excited to adopt, well, guess what? It screams and cries and throws things at you, and then as it grows older, it talks back to you. You didn't really think that that was going to happen. And then the job, that perfect job that you wanted, well, you got it, but you know what? Your coworkers hate you and your boss is a jerk. And there you go. You did something you felt like God was calling you to do. And your greatest moments, the wedding, the baby, the new job, whatever it was, turned out to be really, really difficult. And you feel like you're in this time of darkness. And for David, the same thing happened to him. After David kills Goliath, he becomes this household name. Everyone knows David is the man. But everything changed, and this is where it starts. 1 Samuel 18:6. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, after he killed Goliath, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing and joyful songs and with tambourines and lutes. But as they danced, they sang this: Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Uh-oh, there's going to be a serious problem with women singing that. Because people loved Saul, but now their affections are turning from Saul to David. And Saul does not respond well to this. He doesn't respond to David getting all the attention that he feels like should go to him. Here's just a quick thing we can learn from that. How we respond to other people's promotions actually tells us a lot about our own hearts. How we respond to someone who gets the raise or gets the job or gets pregnant or gets engaged tells us a lot about us and who we are inside. I had a really, really hard time getting pregnant, and my best friend got pregnant. The plan was to get pregnant at the same time. She gets pregnant, and I couldn't. It took a while. And I was shocked at how I felt. Like I had a bad heart. I was jealous. I was mad. I was frustrated that she got pregnant before me. But see, when bad things happen, it reveals our hearts. And that's a good thing. Because when our heart is revealed, we have one of two choices. Behind door number 1, we can ask God to change us. God, would you take away my bitterness? Would you take away my anger? Would you take away my anxiety? All of those things. God, I don't want to be like that. Or door number 2, we can just live in those dark places. And we can destroy ourselves with bitterness and hatred and anger and jealousy. Saul, King Saul, decided on door number 2. Verse 8 says this: Saul was very angry. This refrain galled him. They have credited David with 10,000s, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. Jealousy is a really, really awful thing. And it can ruin your life, and it can ruin the lives of those around you. How many friendships, marriages, families have been broken up because jealousy has gotten its foothold? We see this with Saul. Saul actually loved David until David became a threat to him. Saul was miserable. And when people are jealous, it's usually because they want what you have. They want that good job. They want that good husband. They want those good kids. And suddenly they feel inadequate, and because of that, they take it out on you. And thankfully, David was not shown this before he killed Goliath. Thankfully, David was not shown that King Saul was going to be a serious problem, because it only got worse. Saul turns jealous. He turns into this downward spiral. Look at verse 10. The next day, an evil spirit from God came forcefully upon Saul. He was prophesying in his house while David was playing the harp, as he usually did. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to himself, I'll pin David to the wall, but David eluded him twice. Saul became so jealous. Now he's becoming a madman. He sees David killing this giant. He sees David as this really good commander. Everyone likes David. David can play the harp. And this is why Saul had a problem with him. But Saul's problem went even deeper than that. And this is what is amazing. Verse 12 says this, Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David, but had left Saul. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord had left Saul and now was promoting David. Now think about this, because back then the Holy Spirit didn't come in people's life like he does today. The Holy Spirit rested on people. And so what happened when Saul became jealous and bitter towards David, God withdrew his spirit from Saul. And I think that would be absolutely terrifying. Have you ever wondered what your life would be like if you didn't have the presence of God within you? I can't even imagine. We were at the beach one time and we saw people who had wetsuits on. And they would go out into the water with this thin wetsuit, it's a thin layer. But once the water got inside, it made you warm, it protected you, and it made you not cold all the time. So we were walking on the beach and I thought about that. I thought the wetsuit is kind of like what God's presence is to us. As a follower of Jesus, we have this layer of protection of the Spirit of God in our life. And just like the wetsuit protected these swimmers in the ocean, here's what we learn. The surfers that had the wetsuit on, it kept them warm, but the surfers were not immune from crashing waves or people who were mean and trying to steal the wave from them as they were trying to surf. But they had a layer of protection that others did not have when they were in the water. And see, that's like you and I as Christians. We have daily disappointments, we have tragedies, we have heartaches. But I cannot imagine going through this life without this protection, this layer of the Holy Spirit on me. I believe that's why David could make it through the turmoil that he went through for the next years. Because he had that layer of protection. He had the Holy Spirit guiding him, helping him, strengthening him, interceding for him, advocating for him. Even though his life was spinning out of control. You know what David did? He just kept going. That's what I hope for you and I. That I want us to remember that in the dark times of our life, we need to remember that we have something that most people don't have. We have the presence of God with us. And you say, well, I don't feel the presence of God. Well, it doesn't mean that he's not there. To be very honest, I've always said this. I don't feel the presence of God most of my life. But I love what Andy Stanley said one time. He said, we are least aware of what is most constant. Think about this. The air conditioner in our house, it's running most all the time. I don't even notice it's there, but it's working all the time. The clock, it works all the time, but I don't even notice it because it's constant. The refrigerator, it works 24 hours a day, but I don't even think about it. See, I don't know who told us that we should feel the presence of God all the time, because we don't have to. We don't have to feel the presence of God anytime for him to be there. He's there. That's just great news. The Bible tells us that. But the thought of his presence leaving me would be so frightening to me. And I can understand why Saul was afraid. Verse 10 says this, Saul sought to pin David to the wall with a spear, but he slipped away so that Saul struck the spear into the wall. Then David fled and escaped that night. Saul sent messengers that night to David's house to watch him, that he might kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, told him, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So Michal let David down through the window, and he fled and escaped. And Michal took the Terror of Household Good Luck image and laid it in the bed, put a pillow of goat's hair on its head, covered it with the bedspread. When Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, oh, no, he's sick. Then Saul sent the messengers again to see David, saying, bring him up to me in the bed, that I may slay him. And when the messengers came in, behold, there was an image in the bed with a pillow of goat's hair in its head. Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me so and sent away my enemy so that he has escaped? Michal answered Saul and said, he said to me, let me go, why should I kill you? She lied to save herself, but whatever. But it was then that David's world began to crumble. And slowly God was taking every crutch that David had away from him. Michal, his wife, God took her away. He couldn't depend on her. David had his best friend Jonathan, which was King Saul's son. God took him away also. Look at 1 Samuel 20, verse 42. And Jonathan told David, "Go in peace, for as much as we have sworn to each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, between my descendants and yours forever." And Jonathan arose and departed into the city. David has to leave his job, leave the adoration of the people, because he will be on the run from the king for years and years to come. So 1 Samuel 19:18 says this, "So David fled and escaped and came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and dwelt in Naioth." But Samuel eventually leaves, and David has to go on the run from King Saul. And there you have it, a future that thankfully God never ever let David know about. Because if God had let David know this, David may have said, "No, thank you. No, thanks." But what David had to learn was this: the only one David could trust would be God. The only one. Some of you, it's a good thing you didn't know your future. And now you're stuck in a situation where the only thing that you can do is trust God. That is not a bad place to be. Think of this. David loved God. David believed that God could kill the giant for him. David loved God, wanted God's name to be known. David was loyal to the king, faithful to his job, and yet things went really, really bad for him. And it doesn't seem right. And see, you may be there right at this point in your life. You're doing everything right. Your world is falling apart. You're doing everything right. Your relationship is being destroyed. Your job is being lost. Your loved one is walking away. Your health is failing, whatever. And if that's you, guess what? You are in the exact same place that King David was in. And he was a man after God's own heart. So here's our takeaway. Every day, good, bad, happy, sad, God has his guiding hand on you, even if it doesn't feel like it at all. Because I can imagine that David felt just like you feel. God, where are you? Why is this happening to me? We can feel David's frustration with his conversation with his friend Jonathan in 1 Samuel 20, verse 1. He said, David fled from Naioth to Ramah and came and said to Jonathan, "What have I done? Like, of what am I guilty? What is my sin before your father that he seeks my life?" Like, for some of you, you're just like that. What have I done wrong? And the answer is probably nothing. But this is what's going on. God is just chipping away at the things he needs changed in your life to make you into the person he wants you to be. So the question you need to answer, and I need to answer, is this: will we let him? Because our choice is always going to be mad at God, to be bitter like Saul, or to say like David, "All right, God, let's go. You lead. I'm going to cling to you as we go along in life." And then you know what, God, on the other side of this, I'm going to look back and I'm going to see that you were leading and guiding me all along, even through the bad times. And because I'm a different person, it's awesome. Because you know what, God? I know you better. I love you more. So you know what? I think we should be thankful that God never shows us ahead of time what our future will hold. Because if we knew that, we might not go there. And then if we don't go there, we may not grow in our faith and know God the way he wants us to. Hope that helped you today. Have a really good day.